My name is Helen Carter. I'm 78 years old and I've been called many things in my life. A teacher, a mother, a wife, a widow. But I'll never forget the day my own children called me fragile. They didn't mean it with love either. Not like, "Oh, Mom, you're fragile. Let's take care of you." No, they said it like I was a burden. A glass they were forced to carry. Like they were just waiting for me to break. It started small, the way these things always do. A forgotten phone call on my birthday. You probably wouldn't be interested in coming when I asked about family dinners. A tight smile from my daughter-in-law when I handed my grandson a birthday card with $20 instead of a gift. I ignored it for a long time. You don't raise 3 kids, bury a husband, survive cancer and then fall apart over being left out of a group chat. Or so I told myself. But last month, everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember because I just made myself oatmeal and was halfway through watching the morning news when my oldest son Greg called. "We're stopping by in a bit," he said. "Me and Lisa." I thought, how nice. I even put on a nicer sweater. The one with the small embroidered daisies on the collar that Mark used to say made me look like spring. When they arrived, Greg didn't even comment on the oatmeal, still warm on the table. Lisa barely looked up from her phone. They sat me down on the couch and placed a manila envelope on the coffee table, between us like it was nothing more than a piece of junk mail. Greg leaned forward. "Mom," he said. "We've been thinking, it might be a good idea if we help you manage a few things." I blinked. "What sort of things?" "Your finances, bills, mail. You know, the stuff that piles up." "I've got it covered." Lisa smiled. Tight and fake. "Sure you do, but you're not getting any younger and it's a lot of work." Greg opened the envelope and pulled out a thick document with a bunch of legal-looking lines and boxes. "This is just a simple power of attorney. It gives me the ability to sign off on things for you, pay bills, move money if needed. It's for emergencies, really." I stared at it. "And why do you need this now?" "Because you're fragile, Mom. You may not see it, but we do. You forget things. You don't drive anymore. You live alone. What if something happened?" Something did happen, right then and there. I felt my trust in my own child shatter like glass under a shoe. "I see," I said. He smiled. "So you'll sign it?" I stood slowly. "No." Greg's face changed. Lisa finally looked up. "What do you mean no?" Greg asked. "I mean no," I said calmly. "I may be older. I may move slower, but I still read fine print. And I still think for myself." Lisa's voice turned cold. "It's just a piece of paper." "No," I said again. "It's control. And I'm not giving it to you." Greg's jaw clenched. He shoved the document back into the envelope and stood. "We're just trying to help, Mom. You don't help someone by taking away their choices." They left without another word. I stood in the quiet of my living room for a long time. My oatmeal had gone cold. The news had ended. All I could hear was the faint hum of the fridge and the pounding in my chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Greg's words. "You're fragile." Not once had he asked how I was doing. Not once had Lisa offered to help with groceries, or even taken out the trash when she visited. But now they wanted power over my life. The next day, I made an appointment. Not with a doctor, not with a therapist, with a lawyer. Her name was Amanda Reyes. Young, sharp. She had a calm way of speaking that didn't make me feel stupid for asking questions twice. I told her everything. About Greg, about the envelope, about the slow shift I'd felt in my family over the past 2 years. "They think you're weak," Amanda said gently. I nodded. "And they're circling. Then it's time to draw a line." She helped me draft documents. Real ones. Legal protection, financial independence clauses, and a living trust, but put me in control of everything. while I was still of sound mind, which I absolutely was. If anything ever happens to you, Amanda said, this will make sure your wishes are followed. And if nothing happens, then you still have your voice on paper. I left her office with a folder full of signatures and something I hadn't felt in months. Strength. The next week, Greg called again. We're stopping by, he said. Same tone as before. When they came, I offered them tea, sat them down. Then I opened my own manila envelope and slid it across the table. What's this? Lisa asked, her eyes narrowing. Something for your records, I said. Greg opened it. He didn't even finish the first page before his face went pale. You created a trust, he said. Yes, you assigned someone else as your financial representative. I did. Lisa scowled. Who? None of your business. Greg stood. You're being ridiculous. No, I said softly. I'm being prepared. Lisa crossed her arms. You don't trust us. I looked at her straight in the eye. I don't trust people who want me to sign away my independence. That night I sat at my dining table with a warm cup of chamomile tea and smiled to myself. They thought they were so clever, dropping that paper on my table like I wouldn't read it, like I'd be too scared or too confused to say no. But I had something better than fear. I had paper too, and mine was stronger. The fallout didn't come right away. Greg and Lisa didn't call, didn't text, didn't visit, and I didn't expect them to. That folder had done what years of patient hinting and tight smiles couldn't. It made my boundaries visible. And suddenly they didn't know how to act. At first I was okay with the silence. The house felt still, not lonely. Peaceful, even. I could take my tea in the morning without hearing Greg ask, Mom, are you sure you're remembering to pay the gas bill? I could sit in my garden and not feel watched. But after 2 weeks, I heard from someone unexpected. My youngest daughter, Melissa. She called early Saturday morning. Mom? Hey, I was wondering if we could talk. Now Melissa had always been a bit of a wanderer. She lived 2 towns over with her partner, and rarely called unless it was a holiday or she needed something fixed on her car. So her voice on the phone was already strange. Of course, I said. Everything all right? Yeah, Can I stop by this afternoon? She sounded nervous. That was new. Melissa showed up around 3 p.m., holding a grocery bag filled with peaches and bread. No flowers, no card, just groceries. I opened the door with a small smile. Did you think I was out of food? She gave a sheepish laugh. No, I just thought you might like these. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where her father used to do the Sunday crossword and where she used to sit for breakfast in her pajamas, long before life got complicated. Greg told me what happened, she said eventually, after buttering her toast but not taking a bite. Oh, I said, pretending to tidy the napkins. He said you're getting paranoid, that you're hiring lawyers and locking people out. I chuckled. Is that what he told you? Melissa didn't answer. She just looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time in years. Are you okay, Mom? Better than okay. I'm clear-headed. And for once I'm being listened to, even if only by a lawyer. She exhaled. He said you refused to sign a simple paper. Simple for him. Maybe. It would have handed over my rights like I'm a checkbook with legs. Melissa flinched. He probably meant well. Melissa, I said gently. When someone hands you a paper and says, just sign it, you should always ask who benefits most. She looked down. He said, you're isolating. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I reached for a folded piece of paper I'd tucked in my recipe drawer. I slid it across the table. It was a list, written in my neat, slightly slanted handwriting. She opened it and read aloud. Paid property tax, refilled prescriptions, scheduled eye exam, canceled old insurance, paid gas, water, and electricity, reordered heating oil, cleaned the gutters, grocery run under $50. She looked up. I call it the grocery list test. Every time they question my mind, I write down everything I've done that week. Not just to prove them wrong, but to remind myself. Melissa was quiet. Then softly, "Mom, I didn't know it was like that. You weren't here." She bit her lip. "You're not fragile, you know? You're a little sharp sometimes. Okay, a lot sharp. But you're strong." "Thank you." She hesitated again. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. If something did happen to you, who'd be in charge of things?" I smiled. "There's a document for that." She blinked. "Am I on it?" "No," I said gently. "Not yet. I needed to see who saw me as a person first." Melissa didn't get angry. That surprised me. Instead, she looked thoughtful. Then she took a peach out of the bag, rinsed it under the sink, and sliced it clean in half. We ate together quietly, and it felt a little like healing. That evening, I opened the mail. There was a letter, real mail, from the state pension office. It confirmed my automatic deposits and asked if I'd had any recent changes in power of attorney. I folded it and placed it in the same folder as my trust papers. It felt good to know I had answered that question. Not Greg, not Lisa. Me. But of course, peace never lasts long when people feel entitled to your life. The next morning, I got a knock on the door. It was Lisa. Not Greg, just Lisa. In her dark sunglasses, oversized purse, and heels too high for someone who was clearly trying to accidentally intimidate someone on a Sunday. She didn't wait to be invited in. She walked right past me into the kitchen. "Greg's not coming," she said, setting her bag down like she owned the place. "He said it would be better if I talked to you about the way you've been overreacting." I crossed my arms. This should be good. Lisa opened her bag and pulled out another folder. This one wasn't from an attorney. It was from a bank. "I did some checking," she said. "Do you realize you've put Greg in a very difficult position? He was counting on helping you, on being involved." "You mean he was counting on control?" She didn't deny it. "He is your son," she said. "And I'm his mother. Not a client. Not a dependent. Not a silent wallet." Lisa's mask finally cracked. Her voice raised. "Do you have any idea how hard we've worked to clean up after you?" I took a deep breath, and then I walked to the drawer, pulled out my folder, with the signed trust, the emergency directive, the asset list, and even the letter Amanda wrote, explaining my rights. I placed it on the table next to hers. "You brought bank papers," I said. "I brought the law." She stared at it, unsure what to say. "You came into my home," I continued, thinking I was old and fragile, that I wouldn't fight back. "But let me tell you something, Lisa. I may move slower now, but my pen is just as strong." She didn't stay for tea. That night, I made myself chicken soup. The rain returned, soft, steady. And I thought about how paper works both ways. One sheet can take everything from you. Or in the right hands, it can give it all back. The next morning I walked into the town library. It's not where most people go to fight back. But for me, it felt like home. The scent of old books and polished wood was the smell of my 20s. I taught English for over 3 decades before retiring. I'd helped hundreds of kids find their voices in that building. Now it was time to find mine again. I wasn't there to check out novels. I was there for the community legal workshop. I had seen the flyer a week before on the bulletin board near the post office. Protecting seniors, estate law, fraud prevention, and family boundaries. It felt like the universe had posted it just for me. There were maybe a dozen of us, some older than me, a few younger. One woman had a walker, and a man with a Vietnam veteran cap sat 2 seats away. The speaker was a woman named Jeanette Harlow, a lawyer, late 40s, smart and kind without being condescending. She talked about how adult children sometimes slowly take over, bit by bit, using kindness as a cover. She explained how just helping with the bills could quietly turn into moving money around. She talked about undue influence and what it looked like when someone didn't say no because they were afraid, not because they agreed. I felt like someone had opened a window in my chest. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I was awake, and I wasn't alone. At the end of the workshop, she handed out cards. I took one, slipped it into my wallet next to my senior discount card, and the old photo of Mark fishing in Maine. Then I raised my hand. Yes, she said, smiling at me. I've already made a living trust. I said, but how do I make sure no one can change it behind my back? She smiled wider. Smart question. You add a clause that requires 2 licensed doctors to confirm mental incapacity before any changes can be made. That makes it almost bulletproof. I nodded. And just like that, another piece clicked into place. When I got home, the answering machine blinked with 3 messages. First, a reminder about my dentist appointment. Second, Melissa checking in. Third, Greg. I pressed play. Mom, I don't know what you're trying to prove, but you're making things really hard for everyone. Lisa told me about her visit. You didn't have to embarrass her like that. We're family. We're supposed to take care of each other. Please call me. I sat down slowly. Take care of each other. Funny how those words only seem to show up when they want something. Still, I thought about calling him back. I really did. But instead I opened my drawer, pulled out a blank notepad, and started a new list. Things I do alone now. Handle bills. Grocery shop, file legal documents. Set my own appointments. Remember my wedding anniversary. That last one hurt the most. Not a single one of my children had called me on the anniversary of Mark's death this year. 42 years together. And only I remember. 3 days passed with silence. Then Melissa called again. Mom? Are you free Friday night? I think I can be, I said. Why? Come to my place. I'm cooking dinner. That was new. Her house was small and cozy, with more plants than furniture. Her partner Vanessa greeted me warmly and asked what I liked in my tea. We sat, the 3 of us, while the lasagna finished baking. Melissa cleared her throat. I talked to Greg again. Of course she did. He's upset. So I heard. She leaned forward. But Mom, I told him. He crossed a line. I raised my eyebrows. And he didn't deny it, she continued. He just kept saying he was trying to help. But honestly, I think he liked feeling in charge. That, I believed. Melissa looked down at her hands. Can I ask you something? Of course, if something happened to you, God forbid, who takes over? I took a slow sip of tea. I assigned a trustee, someone outside the family, a professional. She nodded. Vanessa glanced at her, then at me. Smart move. I smiled. Thank you, but Melissa said, if that ever changes, I hope you'll consider me, not because I want control, just because I care. And that felt sincere. After dinner, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a card, handmade. On the front was a painting of a paper crane. Inside it read, you taught me how to read, how to fight for myself, and how to stand alone when I had to. I'm sorry it took me this long to see you doing the same. Tears burned behind my eyes. It wasn't a contract, but it was a kind of agreement just the same. The next morning, I received a letter in the mail, not from the bank, not from the lawyer, but from my grandson, Henry. It was written in pencil, in the shaky hand of a 9-year-old. Dear Grandma, I miss you. Mommy says you're mad, but I know you're not mean. Can I come over and help in the garden? I promise to be careful with the tomatoes. Love, Henry. I pressed the letter to my chest. They could call me fragile, they could call me difficult, but they couldn't call me alone. Not with that kind of love still blooming in the soil. I sat in my living room with the morning sun pouring through the lace curtains, holding a copy of the updated trust in my lap. The paper was crisp, still smelling faintly of the lawyer's office. It had been signed, witnessed, and notarized. Everything now had a clause that said 2 independent doctors had to agree. I was mentally unfit before anyone could change the trust. That single paragraph was stronger than steel. The irony, they called me fragile. They said I was losing grip. But this little clause said I was more in control than ever. I placed the folder inside the fireproof lockbox under my bed. Then I made myself a cup of coffee and waited, because I knew something was coming. That something showed up on my front porch 2 days later. Greg and Lisa. Greg didn't knock gently this time. He rang the bell 3 times in a row, like a child demanding attention. When I opened the door, Lisa was standing behind him, with her arms crossed, her mouth already pursed tight. Mom, Greg said, we need to talk. I stepped aside but didn't say a word. They followed me into the living room like guests trying to reclaim a throne they'd never earned. Lisa sat first, boldly, like she belonged there. Greg paced. We saw the changes, he started. Melissa told us. I nodded. You cut us out, Lisa snapped. I protected myself, I said simply. Greg raised his voice. From your own children? No, I replied. From anyone who thinks I can't think for myself. Lisa stood up. You don't need 2 doctors to tell us if something's wrong. We're your family. I looked her in the eye. And family doesn't lie about doctor visits, or try to slide legal papers under your hand when you're tired. That stopped her. Greg opened his mouth, then closed it again. For a second, the room went quiet except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. Why are you doing this? He finally asked. I folded my hands in my lap. Because you tried to make me small. He looked confused. What? You tried to make me seem confused, tired, forgetful. You told people I was fragile, Greg. You told people I needed help deciding what to do with my own money in my own house. Lisa huffed. We were helping you. You're not young anymore. You need support. No, I said, standing slowly. What I need is to not be treated like a burden. What I need is not to be written off as a signature on a will. Greg rubbed his face. You're your kids. Of course we're thinking about the future. You mean your future, I said, because I'm still living mine. Lisa grabbed her purse like she was ready to storm out. You're being dramatic. No, I said calmly. I'm being careful. And with that, I opened the small safe I kept near the bookshelf and pulled out a copy of the trust. I handed it to Greg. Here, read it. Every word, then decide if I'm the one being unreasonable. He took the folder with stiff hands. I could tell he wanted to throw it back at me, but he didn't. Instead, he said, You'll regret this one day. I smiled. Maybe, but it won't be today. They left without another word. That night, I made chicken soup, the kind Mark used to love. I sat at the table, just me and my bowl of warm comfort. And I didn't feel alone. I felt solid. Because the truth was, I wasn't afraid of being old. I was afraid of being erased. And now, I'd made sure they couldn't do that to me. The next morning, I got a call from Melissa. Mom, she said, Greg's furious. He told Aunt Joan you've gone paranoid. I laughed softly. Of course he did. But Aunt Joan called me right after. She said, "Good for your mother." She said she wished she had done the same before her kids convinced her to sell her house. I sat back in my chair, smiling. Melissa continued, "I just wanted you to know you're not wrong. You're not overreacting. You're honestly kind of amazing." That made me tear up more than I'd admit. "Thanks, sweetheart," I said quietly. "Also," she added, "Henry wants to come help in the garden again. Can I bring him by this weekend?" Of course. Saturday came with sunshine. Henry ran into the backyard with his little gardening gloves and a plastic spade. He went straight to the tomatoes. "Grandma," he said seriously, "I'm not gonna squish the baby ones this time." I laughed. "That's all I ask." Melissa sat beside me on the porch swing. She handed me a small envelope. "What's this?" "Just something I wanted you to have." Inside was a printed letter. Typed and formatted. It was a durable power of attorney form. "I didn't sign it," she said quickly. "I just downloaded it for you, in case you ever want to choose someone. On your terms. No pressure. No tricks." My throat tightened. "I don't know what the future holds," she added. "But I promise, I'll never try to take what you don't offer." I folded the paper slowly. "That," I said, "is the only kind of help I'll ever need." Later that evening, as Henry watered the marigolds, Melissa helped me bring out a pitcher of lemonade. That's when Lisa pulled into the driveway. She didn't get out right away. Just sat in the car. Then finally the door opened. She walked over, heels clacking against the stone path. Her tone was sharp before her lips even moved. "You know you've turned Greg into a mess, right?" I didn't answer. "He says you've cut him out like he's nothing. He made himself nothing when he tried to silence me." She rolled her eyes. "Whatever. You want to be dramatic, be dramatic. Just don't expect him to forgive you." "I'm not waiting for forgiveness," I said. "I'm living." She scoffed. "You're lucky we even care." "No," I said, stepping forward. My voice low but steady. "I'm lucky I realized how strong paper can be before I signed anything you'd written." And with that, I turned and walked back to my swing. Let them call me dramatic. Let them call me difficult. Let them call me fragile. I'd shown them the truth in ink. The rain started just after sunset. Not heavy. Just a slow, steady rhythm tapping against the windows. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, and the signed documents laid out neatly in front of me. My trust. My healthcare directive. My letter of wishes. All of it. It had taken weeks to get it all done properly. I worked closely with Ms. Harlow Jeanette, my lawyer, and she never once rushed me. Every meeting she treated me like a client, not a confused old lady. I reread the line that made me smile most. "All decisions regarding the estate and personal care of Margaret Ellis shall be made by her, unless two state-licensed physicians have independently concluded her inability to do so." Two doctors, not a son, not a daughter-in-law, not anyone looking to help me out of my own home, just me, until I say otherwise. I heard thunder roll softly in the distance, and thought, let it storm. I was ready now. 3 days later, Greg came to the house again, alone this time. He didn't have his usual edge when I opened the door. He looked tired. Not angry. Not exactly. Just defeated. "Hi, Mom," he said. I nodded. "Greg, can we talk?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He sat across from me at the dining table, the same place he once left power of attorney forms like they were homework I'd forgotten to sign. "I talked to Lisa," he said. "She told me about the clause." I nodded slowly. I assumed she would. And about the trustee, that it's someone outside the family now. Yes, he shifted in his seat. Why would you do that? After everything? After all we've done? That question, that tone, lit something inside me. All you've done? I repeated. You mean like trying to get me to sign over authority behind my back, whispering to relatives that I was starting to slip mentally, or pushing Lisa in here with her soft voice and hot casseroles like a Trojan horse. He looked hurt, but not surprised. I was just trying to make things easier. For who? I asked sharply. For me or for yourself? He didn't answer, so I pressed on. You wanted the house without saying you wanted the house. You wanted to control the money without admitting it was about control. But the worst part, Greg, you never once just asked. You never came to me like a son to his mother. You came like a thief with a smile. He dropped his head into his hands. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, I said. And when I protected myself, you called me dramatic, fragile, old. Silence stretched between us, heavy. Then he said something I didn't expect. I saw the letter. What letter? The one you wrote after Dad died. The one you left in your drawer for us, just in case. I froze. I was looking for stamps, he added quickly. And I found it by accident. I read it. I remembered the letter well. I'd written it the week after Mark's funeral. It was more of a love note than instructions. I'd written about how we met. The first time he made me laugh. How we built our life from nothing. I ended it with this. Take care of each other. And please, don't forget that I had a life before you. And I'd like to keep some of it after too. Greg looked up at me, his eyes glassy. I'm sorry I forgot that. I wanted to believe him. I did. But I also knew that guilt was not the same as change. A week passed without another visit. I spent most of it outside, digging up the garden for spring. Henry came over with Melissa on Sunday. He brought seeds he'd picked himself, cherry tomatoes and sunflowers. Grandma, he said while we planted, can we name this one Greg? I blinked. What? He giggled. So if it grows, it means he's being nice again. I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the dirt. That night, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, careful cursive, from Lisa. It read, Margaret, I know we've had our differences. I know I've made mistakes. But Greg isn't handling this well, and I worry about him. He feels like he lost his place in your life. He won't say it, but he misses being your favorite. Maybe this was all a wake-up call. Maybe we needed it. I'm not asking for control. I'm just asking for a second chance. For him and maybe for me too. Sincerely, Lisa. I stared at the letter for a long time. Not angry. Not touched. Just unsure. It was the first time Lisa had ever admitted fault. But I also knew she was clever with words, and guilt didn't always mean regret. Still, it didn't hurt to think that maybe they were starting to see me as a person again. Not a signature, not a relic, just a woman who still had a life worth guarding. Later that week, I went to visit Jeanette again. I want to leave a letter, I told her, like a final instruction. She nodded. We can attach it to the trust. Not legally binding, but it's guidance for your trustee. Perfect. I wrote it at her office. Slow and steady. To anyone reading this, if you're here because I'm gone, I want you to know something. I protected myself. Because I had to. Not because I stopped loving anyone. I wanted peace. Not power. I wanted safety. Not revenge. My hope is that you learn from my choices. Not resent them. And above all, that you understand. Paper may wrinkle, but it never forgets. Neither did I. Margaret Ellis Jeanette smiled when I handed it to her. It's perfect, she said. I smiled back. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was just the truth. Strong enough to stand on its own. It was 2 weeks after I added the final documents to my trust, when the phone rang. The caller ID said Greg Ellis. I let it ring twice before I answered. Hi, Mom, Greg said, sounding hesitant. Greg, I replied. Can we talk? In person? There was something different in his voice. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound demanding. He just sounded smaller, like the man who used to sit on my lap after school and tell me about his science fair project. I agreed. Come by tomorrow after lunch. Greg arrived with Lisa. She carried a grocery bag, flowers, a pie from the bakery I liked, and a folder. I kept my expression neutral. I didn't want to play the part of the forgiving mother just yet. I had boundaries now, and they came first. Lisa spoke first. Margaret, thank you for seeing us. Greg stepped forward. We brought a few things, and we wanted to give you this. He handed me the folder. I didn't open it right away. I looked at him. What is it? It's a declaration, he said. We met with our own attorney. We're officially withdrawing any claims we had over power of attorney. The house, the accounts, everything. We're signing it all back to you, even the informal stuff. I blinked. Lisa added. We also wrote letters to your attorney, to your trustee, acknowledging that everything belongs to you and that we support your right to decide what happens to your estate. I sat down. It felt surreal. The kind of moment you dream about, but never expect to actually happen. Not with people like them. I opened the folder. It was all there. Signatures, notarizations, letters, proof. Greg cleared his throat. I know it doesn't undo anything, but it's a start. I looked up at him. Why now? He sat across from me, running a hand through his thinning hair. Because you were right. I acted like I had a right to your life. Your home. Your decisions. I thought I was helping, but I was just grabbing. And when you pushed back, I called it overreacting because I didn't want to see how wrong I was. He glanced at Lisa. She nodded. Lisa added, I encouraged it. I won't lie. I thought you were slipping. But after reading what you wrote, hearing the lawyer explain your plan, it hit me. You weren't slipping. You were standing up. They both looked at me, waiting. I took a long breath. I don't hate you, I said softly, but I don't forget easily either. Trust is like a porcelain plate. Once you crack it, even if you glue it back, the cracks remain. Greg nodded. I understand. I'll keep these documents on file, I said. And I appreciate the gesture. But let's take things one day at a time. You don't get my full trust back overnight. You earn it. Lisa looked down. That's fair. That night I placed the folder into my filing cabinet, right beside my trust documents. For the first time in months, I felt something new, peace. Not because everything was solved, but because I had control again. They saw me, not as a problem to be managed, not as a burden to be shifted, but as a whole person. A woman, a mother, a grandmother. Still here, still strong. 2 days later, Melissa came by with Henry. He ran into the house holding a drawing. Look, Grandma, it's your garden, I smiled. He'd drawn bright green sunflowers and cherry tomato, but in the middle of it all was a house. And next to the house was me. With glasses. A cane. I don't use one yet. And a smile. Melissa watched me closely. I heard Greg and Lisa came by. She said. They did. Did they apologize? I nodded. And you believe them? I shrugged. I believe they want to be better. That's enough for now. Melissa sat down across from me. You know, when Dad passed, I saw you handle everything. The funeral, the estate, the people calling non-stop asking for donations or investments. You did it all with grace and strength. She smiled. I should have known you'd handle this too. I touched her hand. I'm glad you never doubted me. She looked down. I did. A little. At first. When Greg started talking about the memory slips, I believed him for a second. And I hate that. It's okay, I said. You're human. She squeezed my hand. You're more than that. That weekend the family came over for dinner. Greg and Lisa brought salad. Melissa brought her famous baked ziti. I made dessert peach cobbler from scratch. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of awkward silence. Moments when Greg looked like he didn't know what to say, or Lisa tried too hard to sound helpful. But it was a beginning. At one point Henry crawled into my lap and asked, "Grandma, why do people think old means weak?" I laughed. Because they forget where strength really comes from. He thought about that for a second. Then he said, "Is it paper?" I smiled wide. Exactly. After everyone left, I cleaned up slowly, humming a song Mark used to whistle while he gardened. The kitchen was quiet, warm. I pulled out my old scrapbook and added a new page. I taped the photo of Henry's drawing next to a copy of the signed legal declaration from Greg and Lisa. Above both, I wrote one line. Strong isn't loud. Sometimes it's just legal. The next Monday morning, I received a certified envelope in the mail. At first, I thought it might be another letter from my attorney, but when I opened it and saw the return address, Briar Glen Assisted Living, my stomach turned. Inside was a pamphlet, bright floral cover, soft smiling nurses, wide, empty hallways. At the bottom was a handwritten note. Just something to consider. You deserve comfort. Love, Lisa. I stood there in the kitchen, holding that glossy brochure, and for a moment I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. They were at it again. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at the table, and stared at the pamphlet for a long time. Comfort, I muttered aloud. Comfort, my foot. I picked up my phone and dialed Lisa. Margaret, she said cheerfully. Did you get my little note? I did. I waited. I just thought it might be a good option, she continued. Less stress, more peace of mind. Whose peace of mind, Lisa? Yours or mine? She didn't answer right away. I kept going. You just handed me a folder confirming I own my own house, that I get to make my own decisions. And a week later, you're suggesting I pack it all up and move into a facility? I didn't mean anything bad by it, she said. No, I said. You just meant away. She went quiet. I may be old, I said calmly, but I am not fragile. And I am not confused. I am clear as a bell. I see exactly what this is. Lisa tried again. Margaret, it was just a thought. Well, I cut in. Maybe next time, keep your thoughts between you and your own mailbox. Then I hung up. Later that afternoon, I went to the library, not because I needed books. I just needed quiet, space, air that didn't smell like expectations. I found a cozy chair near the large bay window and pulled out my notebook. I began writing something I hadn't written in years. A letter to Mark. Dear Mark, they still think they know better, still trying to fix things that aren't broken. I miss the way you always let me make my own decisions, even when you didn't agree. You trusted me to be me. That's all I ever wanted from them. I stopped, wiped my eyes. Then I wrote. But I'm not giving up. Not on myself, and not on this house. Not ever. Love, Margaret. That night, Greg called. I heard what happened, he said quietly. With Lisa, I waited. She meant well, he added. She meant control, I replied. There was silence. Then softly he said, I told her not to send that. That surprised me. I told her you'd feel insulted, he continued. But she thinks planning ahead is kindness. No, I said. Planning ahead is fine when you're planning your own life, not someone else's. He sighed. I'm sorry. You already said that. I'll keep saying it, he said. Then he added, I think you're the strongest person I know, Mom, and I hate that it took me this long to realize it. That made my throat catch. Thank you, Greg. A few days later, my neighbor Patricia stopped by. She's 68, loud as a parade, and wears floral everything. I heard from the mail carrier that you've been fighting off vultures with paperwork, she said as she sat on my porch swing. I laughed. Is that what they're saying? Girl, it's what I'd say too. Good for you. We drank lemonade while the sun dipped behind the trees. You ever think about moving? She asked after a while. Not once, I said. Me neither. Let them drag us out in caskets. This is my place. I raised my glass. To women with roots deeper than paperwork. She clinked hers against mine. That weekend, I had Melissa and Henry over again. I made chicken pot pie, Henry's favorite, while he played with blocks in the living room. Melissa helped me with dishes. I heard about the nursing home flyer, she said. I handled it. She nodded. Then she pulled something from her purse. A folded piece of paper. I wanted to show you this, she said, handing it over. It was a poem, handwritten, signed Melissa Ellis. You wrote this? She nodded. I read it aloud. They said her skin was thin, like paper folded too many times. But they forgot what paper holds. Oars, vows, names, and lines. They said she should sit down. Quiet, dim, and mild. But they never asked her stories, or how she raised a wild child. So when they called her fragile and questioned what she knew, she handed them a letter that shook them through and through. I was quiet for a moment. Then I asked, "Is this about me?" Melissa smiled. Who else would it be? I hugged her tight. That night I put the poem in a frame and hung it next to the front door, right above the shelf where I keep the mail, where every piece of paper, from grocery lists to legal documents, passes through. I looked at it and thought, even a signature has a spine. And so do I. The morning after I hung Melissa's poem by the door, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a walk to City Hall. It wasn't a long walk, just a few blocks. The sun was warm and the air smelled like cut grass and jasmine. I wore my wide-brimmed straw hat and sensible shoes and brought along a manila folder under my arm. The clerk behind the counter was young, maybe 22. His name tag said Evan. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I smiled. "Yes, Evan. I'd like to request a property title transfer update and register a notarized family rights document." His eyes widened slightly. "You already have a living trust in place." "I do," I said, "but I'd like to make one last update." He took the documents, flipped through them, and nodded slowly. "Looks in order. Who's the new successor trustee?" I tapped the form. "Melissa Ellis, my granddaughter." It was a decision I'd made after sitting with Melissa on that porch swing the night before. She hadn't asked for it. She hadn't even hinted. But the poem, the way she had seen me so clearly, not as a relic, not as a burden, but as a whole, living woman, it meant more than any legal form ever could. She didn't try to control me. She didn't send me glossy pamphlets. She didn't whisper about memory slips or talk down to me like I was furniture. She listened. And that, I realized, was the most powerful thing anyone could do for someone my age. To still listen. I didn't tell Melissa about the change right away. I waited a week. She came by one Sunday with Henry, and we had our usual ritual: pot pie, lemonade, coloring books. While Henry was busy drawing dragons in the living room, I invited Melissa out to the garden. "I have something for you," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" I handed her a plain envelope. Inside was a copy of the new document, naming her the trustee, giving her full control of the estate, only after I passed. She stared at it in silence. Grandma, she whispered, why me? Because you see me, I said. Not what I used to be, not what you fear I'll become, just me. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I replied. You already did. With that poem, we hugged right there in the garden. I could feel her heart beating against mine, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt not just respected, but understood. Later that night, the phone rang. It was Greg. I heard you made changes again, he said. News travels fast. I'm not mad, he added quickly. Just surprised. You shouldn't be, I said. Melissa earned this. You had your chance. He was quiet for a long moment, then, softly, she's a good choice, I smiled. She is. Then he said something I didn't expect. I was wrong to underestimate you. That's the thing about paper, Greg, I said. People think it's weak, but it carries more weight than fists ever could. The next morning, I made copies of the updated trust and put one in the safe, one in the file cabinet, and one with my attorney. I also took the poem Melissa wrote and printed it again. But this time I folded it into my will, right between the signature page and the final directive. Let them read it when I'm gone, I thought. Let them see who I really was, not just a woman who cooked, cleaned and paid bills, not just a mother or a grandmother, but a whole person, with a name, a backbone, and yes, a paper trail. In the weeks that followed, something changed in the house. Not the furniture, not the wallpaper, but the feeling. Greg stopped hovering. Lisa stopped sending suggestions. And Melissa? She came by more often. Not out of guilt, but love, pure and simple. Sometimes she just sat on the porch and read. Sometimes we planted herbs together. Sometimes we said nothing at all. And that silence, it wasn't empty. It was peace. One afternoon, Henry brought home a school project. What I want to be when I grow up. He showed me a drawing. A little boy standing in front of a courthouse, holding papers. I want to be someone who helps people protect their homes, he said. A lawyer? I asked. He grinned. No. A grandma with paper. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. Well, I said, you've already got the smarts. The seasons passed. I grew slower. Sure, but not weaker. I never needed revenge. I never needed to raise my voice. All I needed was ink on paper and the courage to use it, because paper can be fragile. But when you choose the right words, with the right intent, it's stronger than steel.